It's worth a paper. I'm okay. Thank you. All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. All jurors and alternates are present. Mr. Durst is here with Mr. Chesnoff and Mr. DeGuerin. We have Mr. Lewin, Mr. Balian, Mr. Henderson, Miata, and Millius for the people. Mr. Balian, you may now conclude the people's argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. Thank you. And thank you for your patience. Before we broke, we're talking about the evidence, facts, reality. I'm holding up this planner. Susan's words are in this planner. This is evidence. This is reality. Susan's words in this planner directly impeach his tale he told you. Other than Susan, is there anyone else defendant trusted with the truth? In the end, the defendant had two best friends. One of them he killed. The other one he confessed to. If the defendant did something horrible, who was the one person in the world other than Susan Berman he would have confided in?
We want to know if Bob Durst had shared confidential, secret information. The two most likely people that he would have shared that with, would you agree would be Susan Berman and Dick Chavin?
Yes.
On April 6th, 2015, after repeated efforts to contact Nick Chavin had failed, he finally returned our calls. We tried. You heard the evidence. We reached out to him many times. Mr. Lewin left him many messages. And finally, he returned our call. And from the start of the conversation, Mr. Chavin was reluctant to provide any damaging information against his close friend. If Mr. Lewin is anything, he's diligent. And we reached out until we finally spoke with him. Why was it so hard for Nick to speak with us? Why was it so hard for Mr. Chavin to speak to the two prosecutors? Prosecuting his best friend. He made this clear.
Hey, Nick, can you tell me, is it because of your loyalty to Bob?
I just understand. We need to be honest about it. We're just trying to figure out.
I mean, is it
Is it because you guys are still friends, or?
I love Susan because she's a dear friend. And the same with Bob. So this thing with your best friend killing your other best friend.
Imagine how hard this was for Mr. Chavin. His best friend killed his other best friend. And here comes two prosecutors, and this has been held down within him. He didn't even want to believe it himself for years. And we are forcing him to confront these questions. And it's difficult for him to tell us about his best friend killing his other best friend. You notice in that statement he gave in the very beginning, he didn't deny he had information. He didn't deny that his best friend killed his other best friend. Without even realizing it, Mr. Chavin, in the beginning of that call, had already given up the truth. Mr. Chavin expanded on why it was so hard for him to talk about these issues and what Susan had always said about Kathy.
I know this is tough, but I want you to think about this for a second. Forgetting about Bob for a second, Susan was your close friend, right?
Yep, absolutely.
Forgetting about Bob for a minute, do you want the person who's responsible for her death, do you want that person held accountable? Forgetting about Bob for a second. Just whoever that person is, do you want that person held accountable?
Well, you remember what Susan told me about Bob, which was, there's nothing we can do for her now. She's gone, but he's not.
And so is what the way I'm taking that, Nick, is you're kind of the same thing that Susan said about Kathy. You're now kind of saying to yourself about Susan, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he's alive. He's not.
His best friend is here. Susan's gone. What's the point? What's the point in betraying my best friend? This was a struggle. It was a difficult struggle for him. Imagine the position that we put him in. He didn't want to think about this. He didn't want to talk about this. He loved his friend who had killed his other friend. And we were forcing it to the surface. And he wasn't ready. He buried it deep down. And here we come, forcing it to the surface. During the call, Mr. Chavin made it clear to us that he was not quite ready to tell us what he knew. But near the end of that call, the following exchange occurred.
I know when you get off this call, you're going to probably say to yourself, what have I done? What have I said? And I can tell you that you've said a lot.
So my intention is to duck you as long as I possibly could.
Well,
I was so far under the radar, it wouldn't happen.
Nick knew this day would come, but he'd put it off, and he'd put it off as long as he could. And we forced the issue, and we forced him to talk about it. And he ended the call telling us he'd eventually tell us what he knew when he was ready. It wasn't that day. And we waited, and we waited, and we again forced the issue by calling Nick's wife, Terry Chavin. If you guys recall that. And Terry told us, hey, Nick's eventually going to tell you the truth. I know him. But here's basically where we stand and what he knows. And by calling his wife, we really forced Nick to talk about it. And we put him in a difficult spot. And Terry assured us he would do the right thing. Now, Nick, eventually you heard that second interview where he tried to backtrack and he tried to lie and he tried to say, I never told my wife that. And then we confronted him with some of the stuff and he said, okay, well, if I did tell my wife that, I was drunk and I didn't mean it. And he said a whole bunch of inconsistent things which didn't make sense. And then you heard the stipulation from Terry Chavin that yes, Nick did tell her these things throughout the years. But we forced the issue. And Nick Chavin would ultimately recount in court what happened after the dinner he had with the defendant in late 2014. And remember this, you heard, I'm not going to play a lot of portions of it now because you heard the entire conditional examination of Nick Chavin. But if you remember, what evidence, what was the defendant seeking from Mr. Chavin while he was on the stand on cross-examination? It was all questions geared to show that Nick was a liar and this dinner never happened. He was shown pictures of barrel wine, restaurant, saying, oh, well, this is a different restaurant than the one you ate at, right? He was asked about what credit card he paid to show there was no charges on the credit card. He was asked, well, did he pay in cash and what color was the credit card? All the questions were geared to show that Nick was a liar because that dinner never took place, if you recall. Well, Nick, the defendant was fighting so hard to prove it didn't occur. Whoops. And then we heard from Susie Giordano. And she came into court. And what did she tell us?
You're now aware, ma'am, that there was a dinner that Nick Chavin has testified about where Bob Durst confessed to him, correct?
Yes.
But you're saying you never brought that up to Nick Chavin.
No, Nick Chavin called me.
That's, ma'am,
From that dinner.
it's a yes or no question. Did you ever bring it up to Nick Chavin? Yes or
No.
And there we had it. that dinner did take place. And Susie Giordano came in here and spilled the beans and confirmed that that dinner took place and said she even spoke to them at that dinner. And then what do we have? On April 7th, 2016, the defendant calls Susie Giordano from jail. And what's he worried about? What's he so worried about?
But Nick is calling you and telling you what?
He just wanted me to meet with him and wanted to know why everybody wants to speak to him. He just is a nervous, crazy person.
Wait. He wants to know what?
Why everyone wants to meet with him.
Why the lawyers want to meet with him.
Yeah.
Have you tried asking the lawyers?
No, because that would make sense.
Anyway, it makes me very nervous waiting to find out what Nick's attitude is going to be about this whole thing.
I'll tell you, 100% positive.
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm telling you that he is 100% in your corner.
Boy, you're sure, really.
I am really, really sure.
That makes my night. It really does.
So why is the defendant very nervous, waiting to find out what Nick's attitude is going to be on this whole thing? What is the defendant worried that Nick is going to say? The defendant knows what he should be worried about because he knows what he told Nick at that dinner. And he knows that Nick holds the cards. And that call took place on April 7th, 2016. The very next day, for the first time in years, Bob calls Nick Chavin from jail. And it's very illustrative what topic comes up in the first 30 seconds of that phone call. The first time he talks to him in all these years.
I figure it was about a year ago, actually 2 years ago. I've been in here a year, and I figure it was about a year before that my good friend Andrew Jarecki sent me to prison that we had dinner.
Yeah, I think it was about a year ago. That bastard Jarecki, remember I told you not to do it. You remember I told you, right?
Unbelievable how stupid I could be.
Anyway.
So, what was he so worried about that he tells Susie Giordano he's worried about? Why is he bringing up the dinner 30 seconds into that phone call, out of the blue? He's feeling him out. He's trying to figure out where he is. He is nervous. And he had, based on the evidence, good reason to be nervous because Nick had incredibly damaging information about him. And Nick came into court. He still cares for the defendant. You saw him. You saw his raw emotion. You saw how hard it was for him to tell you what his best friend admitted he did to his other best friend. It was clear he still has feelings for the defendant. He has no reason then to make this up, but he came into court and what did he say?
The dinner concluded, and it was then that as we got up to leave, I realized that we hadn't discussed the two things that he had mentioned, Kathleen and Susan. I felt kind of weird that I didn't bring it up. We walked out the door. This is hard. We walked out the door, and on the sidewalk, I said, you wanted to talk about Susan. And Bob said, I had to. It was her or me, I had no choice. And then he turned to walk away, and I said, you wanted to talk about Kathy. And he just kept walking away. Nothing more was said.
I had to. It was her or me. I had no choice. Those 9 words sum up this entire case. I told you when we began that please don't confuse the length of this trial with the difficulty of this trial. This trial was easy. This trial is logical. It's supported by evidence. It makes common sense. The overwhelming evidence in this case has proven to you beyond any reasonable doubt that Robert Durst is responsible for the disappearance and death of his wife, Kathy. The overwhelming evidence has proven to you beyond any reasonable doubt that he deliberately lied to investigators, ensuring that he would avoid responsibility for his conduct. The overwhelming evidence in this case has proven to you beyond any reasonable doubt that he murdered his best friend, Susan Berman, who had helped him cover up the killing of his wife. The overwhelming evidence has proven to you beyond any reasonable doubt that he murdered his best friend, Morris Black, to silence him. He dismembered his corpse and dumped the body parts into trash bags in Galveston Bay. The overwhelming evidence has proven that when his plan to make it appear that Morris had voluntarily walked away from his life failed, he invented a story that Morris's death had been a combination of accident and self-defense. A fantastical fantasy. The overwhelming evidence has proven to you that when Emily Altman and the handwriting experts again spoiled his plans in this trial, he invented another fantastical excuse. The defendant, ladies and gentlemen, has been running from the truth for 39 years. He has been running from the truth for 39 years. And then in this trial, he had a choice to make. And for him, like all of the other choices he made in this 39 years he's been running, the choice was easy. It was the truth or me. I had no choice. It was the truth or me. I had no choice. Fortunately, that decision is not his choice. That decision is your choice of what the truth is. And for once, you are the body that can stand up for the truth, determine the truth, and end his running from the truth. Because in this system of justice, there is accountability, there is responsibility, there is justice. You are the arbiters of the truth. And on behalf of the people of the state of California, I ask you today to determine the truth. Don't let him run from the truth anymore. Find him once and finally accountable for his actions. Find him accountable for murdering Susan Berman. Find him accountable for killing her to silence her as a witness. Find him accountable for using a firearm, lying in wait, putting it to the back of her head and pulling the trigger. Find him accountable and render fair and just verdicts in this case, verdicts of guilty on all counts, and end his running. He has gotten away with murder for too long. It is time to end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Balian. Mr. DeGuerin, are you prepared to address the jury?
We need to reconfigure the electronics, Your Honor.
All right.
About a 10-minute recess or maybe afternoon recess. I know it's early.
No, not the afternoon, but, oh, you mean the 15-minute recess? No, let's take a shorter break, long enough to set this up. Ladies and gentlemen, you can stand and stretch.
I can say that if you take the afternoon recess now, I can finish before we have to have another recess.
Ah, now he's sweetening the offer. Mr. DeGuerin, you will remain as persuasive as ever. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take 15 minutes then. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case.
I can't get an unscheduled turn, can I?